The New York, Susquehanna, and Western Railroad is, by any measure, an interesting railroad. After Conrail took over most of the railroads in New Jersey on April 1st, 1976, the Susquehanna was the longest of a handful of independent short lines remaining in the state. So naturally, it attracted a lot of interest from rail fans. Most of the photos in this presentation were taken from 1975 to 1986, its last few years of independent operation and the early years of Delaware Otsego operation. During this time period, it transformed from a bankrupt short line to a link in a transcontinental container trains. Okay. Before we discuss the railroad, I want to call your attention to some of the books published on the Susquehanna. I may cite various books during my presentation in which before pictures appear to compare with what I photographed. These are the books on the Susquehanna that I have in my library, all of which were published 20 plus years ago. Since then, many other fine books have been published on the Susquehanna. And here's the publication data on all these. If you have them in your library, that's great. If you don't, you can probably find most of them on the used book market. Okay. The predecessor of the Susquehanna was the New Jersey Midland Railway. And as you can read there, let's see. The earliest predecessor of the New Jersey Midland was the New Jersey, Hudson, and Delaware Railroad, chartered March 8th, 1832, the 9th railroad chartered in the state. Of the 8 earlier chartered railroads, 4 were built. Its plan was to build from the Hudson River west through the northern counties and cross the Delaware River somewhere between the New York state line and the mouth of the Paulin's Kill to connect with another railroad in Pennsylvania, which would build to the northern coal fields. In effect, being New Jersey's first anthracite road. The New Jersey, Hudson, and Delaware was never built, but its charter still remained in effect. The New York and Oswego Midland, chartered May 23rd, 1864, had 2 routes to reach Tidewater. It could use the NJM, or at Pompton Junction, it could swing south on the Montclair Railway. So let me get the pointer here. Here's the New Jersey Midland right here. And this is the Montclair Railway. It built to Greenwood Lake, New York. This later was reorganized as the New York and Greenwood Lake Railway. It was a branch of the Erie. The Montclair Railway stopped short of the state line along Greenwood Lake, and the projected line from there to Middletown was never built. This line right here. Okay, that would have required tunneling, which the Midland could not afford. Let's see. The line from the state line to Middletown is the Middletown, Unionville, and Water Gap Railroad, which was chartered in 1866 and opened in 1868. Here's the Middletown, Unionville, and Water Gap. This was later reorganized as the Middletown and Unionville, and later the Middletown in New Jersey, which is still in business. Okay, this is the Susquehanna in 1894 at the greatest extent. In 1881, the Midland Railroad of New Jersey, the successor to the NJM, was reorganized as the New York, Susquehanna, and Western Railroad. A new railroad was constructed from Beaver Lake through Sparta to Blairstown. At Blairstown, the Susquehanna used the Blairstown Railway to just outside of Columbia, where new trackage was constructed north through the Delaware Water Gap on the New Jersey side of the river. By utilizing the Blairstown Railway, the Susquehanna saved 7 miles of grading. The Susquehanna crossed the Delaware River at a place called Paramac, about a mile north of the present Interstate 80 bridge. The railroad was constructed through Stroudsburg to a connection with the Lackawanna at Gravel Place. The remainder of the Blairstown Railway became the Delaware Branch. In 1892, the Susquehanna expanded again with the incorporation of the Wilkes-Barre and Eastern Railroad, which built from Kingston, Pennsylvania to Stroudsburg. Note that the Susquehanna leased the Middletown, Unionville, and Water Gap Railroad. The Macoupin Lake Railroad, which is, let's see, right there, is only 1.5 miles long, so its length is exaggerated on this map. In the area around Charlottesburg, there were iron ore deposits. That's why the area around there is shaded. And some of these mines were worked going back to colonial times. The iron ore field extended further south into Morris County, and the mines were principally served by the Jersey Central and the Lackawanna. And this is a list of what comprised the Susquehanna in 1902. It had a long main line of 101 miles, a 20-mile branch from Beaver Lake to the state line at Hanford, and a bunch of other branches, 3 miles or less in length. Okay, in 1901, the Erie purchased the Erie in Wyoming Valley. Let's see. Where's this? Yeah. The Erie purchased the Erie and Wyoming Valley Railroad, and it became the favored route for anthracite shipments because it was less expensive to operate. The Erie and Wyoming Valley's summit was at Wimmers at 1,593 feet, while the Wilkes-Barre and Eastern summit was at Pocono Summit at 1,878 feet, a difference of 285 feet. In comparison, the Lackawanna Summit at Tobyhanna was 1,970 feet. The Erie and Wyoming Valley later became the Erie's Wyoming Division. Note that this map does not show the Erie's Graham line, which constructed between 1906 and 1909, which was their low-grade freight bypass in downstate New York. It ran north of the main line. Metro North trains operate over the Graham line, and most of the original Erie main line between Harriman and Graham has been abandoned. So on the map, this is the Erie and Wyoming Valley, which was the preferred route for anthracite shipments. And the Wilkes-Barre and Eastern is right here. The third line, which the Erie used to get to the anthracite fields, was the Jefferson Railroad down to Carbondale from Lanesboro. Okay. This is the first system map produced by the independent Susquehanna. Abandonment of the Wilkes-Barre and Eastern was authorized on January 24th, 1939, and the last run was on March 25th. Although the map shows the railroad ending at Gravel Place, which is over here, in fact, with the opening of the WB&E in 1894, the connection with the Lackawanna was severed and the line was cut back to Stroudsburg. The Delaware Branch had been abandoned in 1928, and the Macoupin Lake Branch was abandoned in 1926. The WB is the arc south of Gravel Place, following McMichael Creek. So this squiggle down here, right, that's the WB&E. Although there was were some freight customers in Stroudsburg, the Susquehanna abandoned the westernmost 12 miles of its line from Warrington, just west of Haynesburg Junction, to Stroudsburg on February 15th, 1941. At Haynesburg Junction, the Susquehanna connected with the Lehigh and New England Railroad. The L&N had trackage rights over the Susquehanna between Haynesburg Junction and Stroudsburg Junction. The L&N opted for trackage rights instead of constructing their own line. So here's the L&N coming into Haynesburg, actually Haynesburg Junction, and it diverged in the Susquehanna at Stroudsburg Junction and then headed up into New York. In September 1957, application was made to abandon the Hanford branch from Franklin Junction to the state line. The New York, Ontario, and Western Railway, the successor to the New York and Oswego Midland, had been abandoned on March 29, 1957. So this part of the Hanford branch served no useful purpose. What the O&W would do is they would send the coal trains down Middletown and Unionville to the connection with the Susquehanna, and they would take the coal trains to the dumpers at Edgewater. Let's see, the Sterling Hill mine of the New Jersey Zinc Company west of Ogdensburg was still active, so this portion was retained 6.29 miles. However, in December 1958, the Susquehanna decided to sell 2.7 miles of the branch from Franklin Junction to the mine to the Lehigh and Hudson River Railway, and the balance of the Hanford branch from east of the mine to Beaver Lake was abandoned. Okay. The next retrenchment came with the abandonment of the Lehigh and New England Railroad, whose last train operated over the NYS&W between Haynesburg Junction and Stroudsburg Junction on October 31st, 1961. With the loss of the L&N's annual rental of $90,000, this caused the Susquehanna to abandon the railroad west of Sparta Junction, 26.45 miles, and the last train ran on August 30th, 1962. The salvage value was $250,000. The right-of-way was sold to the city of Newark for $320,000 for a water pipeline in conjunction with the Tox Island project. But when this project was abandoned, the right-of-way was sold to the state. Tox Island is 4 miles upstream from where the Susquehanna crossed the Delaware River. Also, the last runs on the Paterson City branch were made on January 8th, 1960, after which the branch was abandoned. Right away was sold to the city of Paterson for $165,000. On August 30th, 1971, Tropical Storm Doria washed out the main line at Smoke Rise in Kinnelon Township, and operations were cut back to Butler. (1986) was also the year that our young family was relocated to South Jersey, and we settled in Cherry Hill. So there was little opportunity to visit the Susquehanna on a regular basis. By this time, the Susquehanna was also operating a portion of the New York and Greenwood Lake around Pompton Junction in Riverdale. And you can see that. This is that section of the New York and Greenwood Lake. Okay, after the Lehigh and Hudson River Railway was folded into Conrail, the line between Belvedere and Limecrest was abandoned and the tracks removed. Delaware Otsego purchased the line from Limecrest to Warwick. Although L&HR owned and operated the stub of the Hanford branch at the time this map was made, it is not shown. The line between Andover and Port Morris is actually the Lackawannas Sussex branch, over which the L&HR had trackage rights. Man at the head of Delaware Otsego is Walter G. Rich, shown with his staff bidding on a lot at the auction of the estate of the Lehigh and Hudson River Railway on September 11th, 1982 in Warwick, New York. The L&HR trackage picked up by the Susquehanna from Conrail began just south of here. Unfortunately, Mr. Rich passed on August 9th, 2007, at age 61 from pancreatic cancer. He is the one holding the bidding card right here. Yeah. We picked up some filing cabinets. And this is an overview of the auction. These are the L&HR offices in Warwick, and you have the L&HR main line in the foreground. Yes. With the exception of some maps and some overhead views, all these pictures are mine.
What were they buying at auction?
Everything. The entire estate was cleared out. There were a few items, such as the surveyor's transit, that the L&HR used to survey their line. That was saved and donated, I believe, to a local historic society. But everything else was auctioned off.
Everything at the building.
Everything. Oh, yeah. Okay, connections. Let's see. These are the historic connections. It's not an exhaustive list. If you go back into the 19th century, there are a few more. But the connection at Ridgefield Park, that's fairly recent. That connects Susquehanna with the CSX River line, the West Shore. And the Middletown and Unionville Railroad was a bridge between the Susquehanna and the New York, Ontario and Western Railway at Middletown. The Susquehanna leased a short line from 1873 to 1913. The Susquehanna also crossed the Lackawanna's Branchville and Franklin branches at grade between Sparta Junction and Swartzwood Junction, but there is no interchange at these points. And this is about Susquehanna mileposts. While we're on the slide, I should point out that Jersey City's strategic location opposite Lower Manhattan made it the prime destination for railroads terminating on the Hudson River waterfront. However, getting there posed significant engineering challenges. There is a ridge of trap rock running along the New Jersey side of the river, known as Bergen Hill, which extends from Bayonne north to the New York state line. It increases in elevation the further north you go, becoming the Palisades. Any railroad seeking to terminate in Jersey City either had to get through Bergen Hill or around it. The first railroad through Bergen Hill was the New Jersey Railroad and Transportation Company, chartered March 7th, 1832. They did so by excavating a cut through a low point in the hill. The work started in November 1832 and was open for traffic January 22nd, 1838. Most of the railroads terminating at Jersey City initially used the New Jersey Railroad's terminal at Exchange Place. The cut was expanded for additional tracks from 1876, 1878. In 1871, the Pennsylvania Railroad leased the United Companies, the successor to the New Jersey Railroad. The CNJ went around Bergen Hill, but they had to construct a long bridge across Newark Bay. And the Camden and Amboy avoided the area entirely and tied up in South Amboy. So the reason the Pennsylvania Railroad leased the United Companies, let's see, was the waterfront terminal of the New Jersey Railroad. Okay. It would have been impossibly expensive to build more tunnels through Bergen Hill. And plus, the ferries operated between Jersey City and Lower Manhattan, which was essentially the center of the city at the time. This is where the financial capital of the country still is. So there was a prime location. The Susquehanna is right here, and it had trackage rights over the Pennsylvania Railroad from Marion, which is right there, down to Exchange Place. Okay. And again, the milepost, they are standard Erie design. But they are measured not from the Erie's Pavonia Avenue terminal, but rather Exchange Place.
So it's still there?
This is Exchange Place today, more or less. I took this photo from the Hudson River on September 8th, 2001. And 3 days later, the world changed. Now, Exchange Place is actually a very, very short street. It's between the two high rises, and it runs from the waterfront to the first cross street, which is Hudson Street. And you can see right here, that white thing there, that's a Hudson Bergen light rail vehicle traversing Hudson Street. This is where the Pennsylvania Railroad's Exchange Place terminal was. What's there now is this structure. This is Path's Exchange Place station. Okay, timetables. Let's see, the distances shown in Susquehanna timetables, both employee and public, do not correspond with line side milepost or bridge numbers. That's because the timetable, the distances are measured from Pavonia Avenue in Jersey City rather than Exchange Place. So if you want to get the close to the actual milepost, add 0.8 of a mile to any of these mileages. Okay, Susquehanna transfer. We'll start our journey west on the Susquehanna at Susquehanna transfer. This station was opened on August 1st, 1939, and was located beneath the New Jersey Route S3 bridge. This highway is now New Jersey Route 495. The impetus for the station was the opening of the first tube of the Lincoln Tunnel in 1937. The west portal of the Lincoln Tunnel was about a mile east of this station. For passengers destined for Midtown Manhattan, this was a significant savings of time and money. Here, passengers boarded a bus for Times Square. In 1950, the terminus was shifted to the new Port Authority bus terminal. No longer did passengers have to travel further south to Jersey City, cross the river, then head uptown to their jobs in Midtown. This service lasted until 1966. We're actually looking north on the former northern branch of the Erie. The Susquehanna is behind the Phragmites on the left, and you can see a signal mast on the Susquehanna in the distance. Connections were built between the railroads, both north and south of the station, so trains could cross over to reach the station platform. The inset shows an illustration of one of the motor railer sets used in this service. The Susquehanna and the Northern Branch were both double track railroads and were operated as a 4-track railroad, with the Susquehanna being the eastward tracks and the Northern being the westward tracks. This arrangement continued even after the Susquehanna became independent of the Erie. The Erie banned the motor railers and later the RDCs from operating into Jersey City over concerns that they would not shunt track circuits through Bergen Tunnel or the Bergen Archways because of rusty rails. By the way, the design of the RDC was heavily influenced by Henry K. Norton, who was trustee of the Susquehanna at the time of its development. He had a friendship with Edward G. Budd, and many of the Susquehanna's requirements were incorporated into the design. The Susquehanna tested the prototype car in April and May 1950, and 4 RDC-1s, M1 through M4, arrived that October. Okay, Little Ferry Junction. You'll notice that Little Ferry on these maps is a locale on both sides of the Hackensack River north of the Overpeck Creek. The borough of Little Ferry was formed from New Barbados and Lodi townships on September 20th, 1894, and that town is located on the west side of the Hackensack River. The 1898 map doesn't show the recently formed borough. Little Ferry at one time was a neighborhood encompassing both sides of the Hackensack. So that's where the place got its name. Now, what you see on the right is after the Edgewater Branch was constructed right here, and also a large yard for handling anthracite was constructed between the main line and the branch. To get into, let's say, Edgewater, they had to first cross the main line on an overhead bridge over the Susquehanna main line, the West Shore, and then the northern branch. And you can see it's mainly swamp in there too, along the Hackensack. It's the Hackensack Meadowlands. Hackensack, the Susquehanna's nexus of operation was Little Ferry Junction, or simply Little Ferry, even though it was actually located in Ridgefield Borough. Once the Susquehanna became independent of the Erie on March 1st, 1940, the company began rehabilitation of the Little Ferry shop facilities and installed shop machinery and tools. Diesel equipment handling facilities were installed in 1941 in preparation for their first two diesel locomotives. Additional facilities for servicing diesels were installed every year between 1945 and 1950. By the end of 1989, the Little Ferry yard was sold to CSX Intermodal. The sale of the yard was completed in 1991. The whole complex has been raised, so this is no longer there. And a new open-air engine facility was established in Ridgefield Park, north of the Route 46 overpass in 1992. Except for running repairs, all locomotive maintenance is now performed at the Susquehanna's Northern Division shops in Utica. Okay, the Susquehanna welcomed visiting rail fans. All you had to do is visit the office, fill out and sign a release, and you were allowed. The Susquehanna had a 100-foot operational turntable. I recall that there was water in the turntable pit, and there was a good-sized snapping turtle in there as well. Today, the turntable is the only structure left at Little Ferry. You might ask the question, why the Susquehanna has such a long turntable? And the answer is the Erie had trackage rights over the Susquehanna between Passaic Junction and Granton Junction. And their coal trains would often be headed by a Class N Mikado, Class R Santa Fe, or Class S Berkshire, and the Susquehanna needed a turntable to accommodate them. Since Little Ferry was the railroad's base of operation, now is a good time to take a look at their equipment. Here we see GP-18 1804 at the Roundhouse. The Susquehanna had 3 GP-18s from EMD in September 1962. Purchase price $560,892. The U.S. government guaranteed a loan of $555,000 for the acquisition. Let's see. In its last years before Delaware Otsego purchase, Susquehanna had 7 operational diesel locomotives, 6 of which were roadworthy. There are 3 RS1s, numbers 238, 240, and 252, 3 GP-18s, numbers 1800, 1802, and 1804, and 1 S2, number 206. RS1 252 was painted in a bicentennial scheme. All 3 RS1s have been scrapped, and the GP-18s were sold to the East Penn Railway in April 2010, where they continue to operate today. Today, Susquehanna has 15 locomotives, all secondhand. And this is RS1 number 238 at the Sanding Tower. And the Susquehanna had an unusual numbering scheme for their diesel locomotives. Even numbered units were equipped for multiple unit operation, and odd numbered units weren't. This numbering scheme did not apply to 3 units which were used to shunt rail cars at the C train facility in Edgewater. And here's GP 1802 with RS1 252. The facility in the background is PSE&G's Bergen Generating Station. It had its own GE center cab switching for shunting coal hoppers. And this is their locomotive. It was a 100-tonner. The Susquehanna tracks are in the foreground here. Behind the Phragmites, that's the West Shore right there. This locomotive is now in the URHS's collection at Boonton. And in this 1981 photo, GP 1802 and RS1 240 were painted with silver trucks. These are some of my early photographic expeditions there. Getting used to a camera and film and making all the settings on the camera, and you're shooting slide film. Sometimes you overexpose a little bit. When the Susquehanna dieselized, it chose to roster the Elco S2 switcher and the Elco RS1 light rail switchers, which are perfect. Both models used the 6-cylinder turbocharged 539 engine, which delivered 1,000 horsepower. Susquehanna had 6 S2 switchers, numbers 202 through 206 and 208. Following their number scheme, numbers 203 and number 5, and 205 is shown here, were not equipped for MU operation. The Susquehanna owned a total of 18 RS1 light road switchers, but the first 2, numbers 231 and 233, were requisitioned by the U.S. government in 1942 and rebuilt by Elco to RSD ones. The Susquehanna got new units of the same numbers in 1943. So the maximum number of RS1 units on the roster at any one time was 16. Here we have second 231 and 234, both out of service. Note the stack on the short hood. These units were equipped with steam generators for passenger service. The little ferry facility was littered with out of service Elcos. The story goes that these hulks were kept around to keep the property value up. When Delaware Otsego took over, these derelict units were scrapped. Number 231 first was rebuilt to U.S. Army RSD-1 number 8000 and still exists in Dallas, Texas. RS-1 246 is also preserved. And here's a lineup of the derelict RS-1 switchers, road switchers. These are all scrapped. The Susquehanna had 10 standard NE6 cabooses, numbers 0110 through 0119, built by the International Car Company. Here are 0119 and 0112. When Susquehanna became independent of the Erie, they had virtually no equipment. So they purchased 10 old wooden cabooses from the Erie and refurbished them in 1940, rehabilitated them. 9 were retired in the 1940s. Eight of these new cabooses were purchased in 1948, followed by the other 2 in 1949. The last wooden caboose was retired in 1952, leaving the 10 steel cabooses. Now I can account for 4 of these 10 cabooses. Caboose 0112 was sold to a private individual in 1979, who in turn sold it to the Morristown and Erie Railway in 1982, where it was repainted in M&E livery and renumbered 4. It was retired in 2011, and in January 2012, it was moved to the Whippany Railway Museum and restored to its original appearance.
John, before you go on, what's that narrow gauge track for?
Don't know.
What is that?
I don't know.
Something to do with the shop, maybe?
The only thing I can think of is it had a coal yard south of here. Maybe they had some narrow gauge locomotive. But that's something that I've never run across that question before, or even that answer. So let me research it. And here is caboose 0111. All non-revenue rolling stock on the Susquehanna had a 0 prefix on their numbers. And here is caboose number 0115. It is Sunday, October 11th, 1981. You see that dirigible up there? Yeah. That's likely covering the New York Jets New England Patriots game at the Meadowlands. The Jets won 28-24, and the Jets finished 10-5-1 that year, second in their division. The Susquehanna purchased several Lehigh Valley boxcars and renumbered them in the 500 series. Some were painted, and some were not. You can see the Lehigh Valley diamond on the right there. Prior to 1979, the Susquehanna had exactly one freight car in interchange service. This 40-foot XM boxcar number 526. It was built in November 1952. Starting in 1979, Susquehanna acquired new boxcars. Here's one of their new 50-footers. Also had a tank car on the property, number 1000. Okay. This is one of the ex-Delaware and Hudson, ex-Boston and Albany coaches, which were used up to the cessation of passenger service in 1966. So 11 years later, they had this coach still on the property. And this is number 0280. An American diesel crane purchased in 1954. And behind is their flat car 0390. Okay, this is private boxcar, the Bergen Evening Record boxcar. Beneath it says Short Line Railroad and Navigation Company. This is boxcar number 101. And this line reads, "Friend of the people it serves." And there was also this ex-Central Vermont office car. I first saw it in Little Ferry in August 1980. I took this photo. Last time I saw it there was in June 1982. So usually RS1s were used to work the hump yard. And here's number 252 on a winter's day. It's going back past the hump tower. Another close-up shot of the locomotive. And on this occasion, number 238 was doing the yard work. And in the distance, you can see the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center. Again, working the hump and the engine on the hump. On Sunday, October 11th, 1981, Jersey Central Chapter NRHS sponsored a fan trip over the Susquehanna, which included a visit to Little Ferry And GP-18s, 1802 and 1804 were the power for the trip. Here the excursion train is posed on the hump. And under Delaware Otsego management, improvements had already been made to the yard. On Sunday, June 27th, 1982, Recycling Railroads Incorporated, an organization based in Newton dedicated to preserving abandoned railroad rights-of-way, sponsored an excursion over the Susquehanna called the Susquehanna Transfer. Boarding was at Saddle Brook, and the first stop was at Little Ferry. And doing the honors for the day were GP-18, 1804, and RS-1 240. The Dome 511, let's see. The train was supposed to use all ex-auto train Dome cars, but a fire of suspicious origin early on June 22nd destroyed Dome 511 and heavily damaged Dome 522. The full-length domes were built by Budd for the Santa Fe in 1954. After Auto Train entered bankruptcy in 1981, its equipment was auctioned off that December in Delaware in pieces. Okay. And three other cars, Delaware Otsego cars, and including this ex-C&J coach, were substituted to make up for the lost equipment. Okay, the Edgewater Branch. The Edgewater Branch was 3 miles long and diverged from the main line, roughly where the eastern spur of the New Jersey Turnpike crosses over the railroad. The branch was the only tunnel on the Susquehanna. It is the longest and northernmost railroad tunnel through the Palisades. And the Susquehanna has the distinction of being the only railroad in the United States that tunnels beneath a cemetery. And there you can see Fairview Cemetery right there. But the railroad was there first. On April 30th, 2023, it's 3 weeks ago, 2 boys got trapped by rising water in the tunnel and had to be rescued by the Edgewater Fire Department. And when they built this tunnel, they worked at both the east and west faces, but they also sunk 3 shafts. So in total, they had 8 faces to work. And 2 of those shafts were later covered up. But you can see right here, that's the shaft for one of the excavation. Still there.
Those commercial buildings on either side of it.
It could be commercial or residential. Yeah.
So it's abandoned?
The tunnel is abandoned. Yeah.
It said it's the first one built under a cemetery, because there's a tunnel under, the tunnel that goes through Tunnel Hill in Phoenixville has a cemetery at top. And it has a shaft.
Okay. Yeah. Apparently, this tunnel, because of its location underneath the cemetery there, made it to Ripley's Believe It or Not, and was cited as the only tunnel in the United States that was beneath the cemetery. But yeah, it's something to check out. Maybe Ripley's is wrong.
Well, it might have been, the Phoenixville cemetery might have been built after, placed there after.
Yeah, in this case, the cemetery was there later. From what I can gather, it was dedicated in the early 1900s. Okay, Edgewater. On this day, RS1 number 252 was assigned to switch Edgewater. We're looking north. The line of boxcars to the left is curving towards the tunnel portal. The Edgewater station would be on the right. And the large building in the middle background is the Hills Brothers coffee plant, which the Susquehanna served. Yeah, a little bit further south of the previous location, You can clearly see Bergen Hill and the beginning of the Palisades. Much of the land at Edgewater Terminal was created by the Susquehanna between 1892 and 1894 by dumping spoil from the tunneling into the Hudson River. There was substantial business in Edgewater in 1979. However, by the 1990s, the traffic had disappeared and the Edgewater branch was abandoned. Since then, the area occupied by the railroad has been redeveloped. Basically, housing, strip malls, restaurants, service economy.
And that's what Air Shack is?
No. This is down at the waterfront. Okay. The whole reason for building the Edgewater branch was to provide a tidewater coal terminal for the Susquehanna. Susquehanna had a McMyler 700-ton coal dumper, 105 feet high at Edgewater, which was installed in 1917. On July 9th, 1951, the Redding's McMyler dumper at Port Redding was destroyed in a spectacular fire. The Redding needed a replacement quick, since at the time, the Redding provided about 20% of New York City's coal supply. Due to a steel shortage, a new dumper would have taken about 18 months to deliver. However, the Susquehanna's dumper had not been used since July 1st, 1948, and so it was sold to the Redding by court order on September 18th, 1951 for $180,000. The dumper was dismantled, loaded onto barges, and floated 35 miles south to Port Redding. Port Redding is on the Arthur Kill opposite Staten Island, where it was reassembled just in time for the winter heating season. Okay, this is Port Redding. This is the reassembled Susquehanna's coal dumper at the Redding's Port Redding yards.
What year is that? Or 86.
Yeah.
Just still there.
Yes, it is, but it has been shorn of its approach trackage. It's no longer used as such, but it's still there. In late 1945, sea train lines contracted with the Susquehanna to build a new terminal at Edgewater, which was opened on March 12, 1947. Previously, sea train was in Hoboken. Using this gantry, entire freight cars would be loaded into the hold of ships operating between here and Gulf Coast ports and Havana, Cuba. Later destinations, Savannah, Georgia, and San Juan, Puerto Rico were added. The sea train ships could hold up to 100 freight cars. This was a substantial boost to the railroad after the anthracite trade diminished. However, in the 1960s, Sea Train moved their facility to Port Newark, ending this operation. In 1987, the gantry and the Hills Brothers coffee plants still stood, but have since been removed.
Is that the hill you talked about?
That's Bergen Hill in the background. That's where it's also called the Palisades. Okay, so returning to the main line. I'm standing between the two mainline tracks as GP 1800 returns to the yard with 4 freight cars. The speed limit on the main line at one time was 60 miles an hour, at least through 1957. In 1959, it was dropped to 50 miles per hour. The bridge in the background carries Route 46 over the Hackensack River. That's Route 46 bridge there. And the number 1804 is on the eastward track here. Eastward and westward semaphores are out of service, obviously. Searchlight signal with 2 heads protects the interlocking south of Overpeck Creek Bridge. Note the sign for beginning a circuit for automatic gates, Bergen Turnpike. The Conrail River Line West Shore is to the right, and it has a separate pole line. Here we see S2 number 206 in its original paint scheme, crossing the Overpeck Creek en route to its dedication ceremony at the Bergen Turnpike grade crossing on March 16th, 1985. The Bergen Rockland chapter NRHS contributed $500 to the cost of repainting the locomotive. Previously, it was used as a shop switcher, but afterwards was placed back in service on the newly acquired L&HR trackage. Unfortunately, in the spring of 1985, number 206 suffered an engine failure and was retired in 1986. It was used as a trade-in credit for four GE B40-8 locomotives. But in 1989, GE donated it to the URHS. In 2006, the Maywood Station Historical Committee approached the URHS about the possibility of giving the engine a new life as part of the Maywood Station Museum. On October 14, 2008, the Susquehanna moved number 206 to Maywood Station, where it is today. But it was repainted in the second paint scheme, which is a simplified silver and maroon. Ridgefield Park is located just south of Mount Vernon Street and is the only Union station on the Susquehanna. This is the street side view. The station was opened on August 20th, 1927 and cost about $100,000 even back then. We're looking north on both the Susquehanna and the West Shore. At this point, the West Shore went to 4 tracks, and this one was just down to 1 track. Currently, it's 2 tracks. CSX put in one of the additional tracks. This was an interesting place to rail fin because you had the Susquehanna, you had the West Shore, which of course is New York Central. You had the New York, Ontario, and Western operating over the West Shore, and you also had Erie Motive Power operating over the Susquehanna. Let's see. Once Delaware Otsego took over, work began in earnest to improve the physical plant. This work train was heading west on the eastbound main, and the crew was busy distributing new ties along the right of way. The location is Cross Street in Bogota. Federal Paperboard Company plant is still there today. It stands the water tower. What you see beneath, let's see, get the right button here. What you see right there underneath the Interstate 80 bridge is the Empire State Building. And that's looking at the other direction. Much has changed here. The eastbound main is gone. So is the siding on the extreme left, and the railroad's pole line has been removed. Bogota. The Bogota station still stands on the north side of West Fort Lee Road. However, the fence around the station has been removed. The eastbound track has been removed, as was the semaphore protecting the Hackensack River movable bridge. Notice the semaphore had a square blade indicating an absolute signal. At one time, the semaphore also had a smash board, which was lowered across the track when the bridge was open. And number 1802 is heading eastward on the westbound track on the Hackensack River movable bridge. The swing bridge is near the west end of the trestle. And you can see the bridge fenders there. The plant to the left is the Record, and you can see a freight car spotted on its private siding, most likely containing newsprint. Hackensack. In 1872, Bergen County consisted of 12 townships. Okay. However, laws passed in late 1880s and the early 1890s encouraged the formation of new boroughs from old townships. And in 1894 alone, at least 30 boroughs were formed. Bergen County now has 70 municipalities, by far the most of any county in the state. And by the way, Cherry Hill there, that was just the neighborhood at the north end of Hackensack. Okay, what we have here, this is sort of looking west. So you have the Susquehanna coming here. Here's Bogota here. This is the Susquehanna, and the line here is the New Jersey and New York, now known as New Jersey Transit's Pascack Valley line. And that can be ridden any day of the week.
What's the date of that map?
1921. Okay, obviously an Penn Central boxcar. It's 40 feet long, type XM. It's actually standing in a new team track yard, which was built in 1950. And you can see the record in the record's offices and print house in the background. Yeah, this is the third and latest Susquehanna Hackensack passenger station. It was located on River Street, and it was opened on at noon on June 29th, 1950. It cost over $44,000 to build and was built of brick. It measures approximately 40 feet by 25 feet. And in this view taken almost 4 years later, the station has been repurposed as a flower market. Note the covered walkway leading up to the eastward track. In the background is the records building, and an RF&P boxcar is on the private siding. This station, though, has since been razed. It's no longer there. Okay, 2 semaphores at the Moore Street grade crossing. Automatic governing the westbound track and an absolute governing the eastbound track. Let's see. There it is. Okay, and you can see there's a smash board on the eastbound track there, which would be lowered when the Hackensack River Bridge was open. These 2 buildings are now gone. One is obviously a section house. I don't know what the one at the upper left is. The second Hackensack station was built of brick in 1901 at a cost of $13,423.24 and was the largest on the railroad. It occupied the space between the railroad and Mercer Street and Moore Street in the foreground and Main Street. The record of September 12th, 1950 noted that the station would be demolished except for the railway express section on Mercer Street. The only surviving portion of the second station became this Blimpie base at the corner of Moore and Mercer Streets. The building still exists, but its distinctive bell cast gable roof has been replaced with a flat roof. But if you go on Google Maps, look at Street View at Moore Street, this is Moore Street right here. You'll notice these columns right here. That gives off that gives away that that's the railroad station. Okay, this westbound freight is crossing Maywood Avenue, the only grade crossing in Maywood. Much has changed since this photo was taken. The GP18s are gone, the eastbound main is gone, the pole line is gone, and the westbound main has been rebuilt using welded rail and crushed stone ballast. And for a while, the Maywood Station was used as the VFW hall. Okay, the Susquehanna's S2 switcher number 206 is now located right over here. Okay, with the sale of Little Ferry Yard in 1989, the Susquehanna reconstructed the Rochelle Park Passenger Station to serve as the headquarters for the Susquehanna Southern Division. When this photo was taken, the station was used by a business called the Tinderbox Fireplace Shop, which sold coal and wood burning stoves. And here's a view of the station in the other direction. And Rochelle Park also had a freight house. This has been demolished. And we're looking eastward at Rochelle Park, while GP18 1802 drills a boxcar and a tank car. And here it has just crossed the Saddle River on its way to Passaic Junction to drop these cars on the interchange track with Conrail. The highway bridge is Interstate 80. The eastbound track, which is to your left, is now cut at Saddle River Road, grade crossing. And the searchlight signal is gone as the pole line. And Passaic Junction. Passaic Junction was the junction point between the Susquehanna's main line and the Passaic branch. The Passaic branch diverged to the left beyond the Bergen County line overpass. Passaic Junction was also the chief interchange with Conrail and later Norfolk Southern, which is out of the photo to the right. You can see the curbing for the eastbound station platform on the left. But the station was long gone by the time I took photos. And that's one of their new boxcars, built in January 1979, graffiti free. And let's see, the NRHS 1988 convention was hosted by Tri-State chapter. And one of the excursions was to ride over the Susquehanna between Passaic Junction and Warwick, New York. The power for the excursion was brand new B40-8 number 4006, which was built at Erie, Pennsylvania the previous month. So it is brand new in this photo. The other locomotive was F40 number 3636. Here's the train at the start of the excursion. Was anyone here on that excursion? Okay. Okay, it would be an eventful day. Okay, on the L&HR in Hardyston, a loaded dump truck tried to beat the train over the crossing. They tied. And that's what the locomotive looked like afterwards. Brand new, only a month old. Fortunately, the locomotive is still functional. Passaic Branch. This is the only shot I ever got on the Passaic Branch. And it's 1800 is crossing Market Street in Elmwood Park, heading back to Passaic Junction. The Passaic Branch was 3.1 miles long and served Elmwood Park, Garfield, and Passaic. About half of the branch has been abandoned, so no longer serves Passaic. Crews were required to flag all grade crossings on the Passaic Branch. Elmwood Park, which was East Paterson until January 1st, 1973, was home to the Markel Paper Mills, an important customer, which had plants on both sides of the tracks. Robert L. Marcalis, chairman of Markel, was on the Delaware Otsego Corporation board, at least from 1985 to 1996. possibly more. And Nicholas R. Markellis, president of Markel, was on the NYS&W's Business Development Advisory Board. And this is another 1921 map. Paterson had 3 railroads: the Erie's main line, Lackawanna's Boonton line, and the Susquehanna. The Susquehanna reached the commercial district by its 3/4 mile long Paterson City branch, which paralleled Broadway a few blocks south to Straight Street. The Susquehanna's double track ended at Riverside Station, where River Street crosses the railroad at grade. So let's see. Here's the Paterson City branch, and you can see City Hall right there. And the double track on the Susquehanna extended up here. This is where Riverside Station was. There it went to single track. The first station was Vreeland Avenue. This was constructed in 1949 at a cost of over $14,000, at which time the old station was retired. The station was located just beyond milepost 19, which is hidden by the weeds between the building and the westward track. And this photo taken 4 years later shows the eastward main has been taken out of service and the grade crossing repaved. And you can see milepost 19 right there. Okay, this is a Sanborn map, and it shows where the Paterson City branch diverged from the main line. And this is the Broadway Paterson station right here. Here's the Paterson City branch, which was double tracked. And this was the main line. This was originally a one-story building. The second story was added in 1942 to house offices of the car department, superintendent, and trained dispatchers. Compare this view with Kraus and Christ, page 34, and Lucas, page 162. The Paterson City branch diverged to the left where the fence is. The station measured 20 by 47 feet. And this is the view from the other side. The Paterson City branch is right away is where the buses are standing. And we're crossing the Passaic River at the north end of Paterson. We're looking upstream, and the bridge in the distance there carries New Jersey Transit's former Erie mainline trains. Watchung Mountain is in the distance. And we're looking south on the former Erie mainline. At the right, you can see the connecting track between the Erie and the Susquehanna. Again, here's the connecting track. We're actually in Hawthorne right now. Yep, that's the connecting track with the former Erie main line at Hawthorne. The connection hasn't been used in a while. Should passenger service ever be reestablished on the Susquehanna, this connection would come in handy for commuters living north and northwest of Paterson, as far away as Sparta. Direct access to Paterson and Hoboken would be accomplished by using this track. In Hawthorne Station is still at the Diamond Bridge Avenue grade crossing, but since this photo was taken, it has had at least 2 new paint jobs. Let's see, this eastbound train is just across Warburton Avenue grade crossing. Semaphore and pole line are now history. The Susquehanna had another station in Hawthorne called North Hawthorne, north of here. At North Hawthorne was the Susquehanna's car shops. All that stuff is gone. Midland Park, at the time this photo, a company called the Stripping Depot operated a furniture refinishing business in the Midland Park station. The station was on Goffle Road and leased to the business by the Susquehanna. It was one of the larger stations, measuring 78 by 17 feet. On Wednesday, August 28th, 1985, though, the station went up in flames. The furniture stripping business used volatile solvents such as methylene chloride in removing paint, and an employee lit a cigarette inside the building. The employees made it out safely, but a 74-year-old volunteer firefighter who responded to the blaze was killed in a freak accident when the fire engine rolled over him. I got there the following day after work to photograph the damage. Now, there was a lumber yard across the tracks, and some empty boxcars on a siding shielded the lumber yard from the flames. But the paint on the box cars was scorched. Wharton Dyke, which is also in Midland Park Borough, was the site of the New Jersey Midlands shops. This view looks west. Station measured 16 by 50 feet. In 1914, there was a 58-foot turntable and an unused roundhouse here. And Wyckoff, that was a little bit larger, 19 by 50 feet. Crystal Lake. The Crystal Lake station stood behind the crossing flasher at the right of the train. The New Jersey Route 208 bridge was a good vantage point to get the shot of a westbound inspection train. The power on this train was Alco C430s 3004 and 3008. This whole area has been changed by the construction of Interstate 287, and a portion of the railroad was relocated through Franklin Lakes in 1990. Oakland, the Homely Station Award on the Susquehanna goes to Oakland. Actually, this isn't a railroad station at all. It's the Oakland Post Office. An agreement was worked out between the borough, the railroad, and the post office department, whereby the station grounds were sold to the post office, and this building was erected on the site of the old station. The building served as a waiting room for passengers, and there was a ticket window inside. The project was completed in 1958, and since this photo was taken, the building has been raised. Sometimes you get lucky. On this day, GP 1800 was working west to Butler, and I was able to photograph it crossing the Ramapo River at Oakland, one of the most photogenic spots in the railroad. And not surprisingly, it is pretty much a mandatory stop on fan trips. Note that the bridge was built for a double track, but it only ever had a single track. And I also got it coming back from Butler. The same inspection train I photographed at Crystal Lake, I also got at West Oakland. Note that the Susquehanna's Ramapo River Bridge now also carries a water pipeline in the space that was reserved for the second track. You can see the pipeline over here. It is. Yeah. Yeah, the pipeline project worked out very well for rail fans because all the brush was cleared from the right of way. And Pompton Lakes, that had a fieldstone station. That really dates it too. Pompton Junction. Pompton Junction was where the Susquehanna crossed the Erie's New York and Greenwood Lake division at grade. We are looking east on the Susquehanna. The connecting track between the two lines swings off to the left. The Pequannock River is on the right. In New Jersey Midland days, there was another connection which swung to the right across the river. Both railroads had passenger service up to 1966, and the diamond was protected by color light signals in all four directions. The train that approached the diamond first got the green light. Conrail operated the Greenwood Lake branch for a while, but ceded a portion of the line south of the junction to the Susquehanna. It is still active today, and the diamond is still in place. And here's a view of Pompton Junction from another angle. We are looking south in the Greenwood Lake branch, and the connection to the Susquehanna swings off to the right. Once Delaware Otsego took over, bridges were rebuilt all along the railroad, and 90% of them had been rebuilt by 1990. The mast of one of the colored light signals that protected the crossing can be seen beyond the frog on the connecting track. So here's the signal mast right there. Susquehanna operated an Operation Lifesaver excursion train on May 20th, 1987. Here it is passing through the site of the Bloomingdale station, which was actually in Riverdale. The Susquehanna bolstered their motive power with ex-Burlington Northern SD-45s, which in this photo had not yet been renumbered or repainted. Butler Coal and Oil Company building is still there, and it makes good subject for painting. So we had an artist out there one day. And no, this is not the Patco that we all know and love here. Patco makes dye, makes green dye. If you have a terrible looking lawn, just spray it with Patco dye and it looks nice and green. Probably. Delaware Otsego got back into the steam-powered passenger excursion business by purchasing a Class SY 282 Mikado from the Tangshan Locomotive Works in China in 1990. It was numbered 141, one higher than the last NYS&W steam locomotive, which was purchased in 1906, a consolidation weighing 130 tons that spent its career on the Erie at Port Jervis, being too heavy for Susquehanna rails. Unfortunately, the ship carrying number 141 to the U.S. sank in the Bay of Bengal in 1991, and that is where the locomotive is today. A similar locomotive was built in 1989 for the Valley Railroad in Essex, Connecticut, as their number 1647. In 1992, the Susquehanna purchased this engine and renumbered it 142. Today, this engine is owned by the NYS&W Technical and Historical Society and is operated on excursions out of Phillipsburg. Here we see 142 heading an excursion to Warwick through Butler in 2000. Note the track has been improved, welded rail and crushed stone ballast. By the way, this locomotive was unloaded in Camden.
Still running?
Yes. Butler was the end of the outer commuter zone and had one of the largest stations on the railroad, 24 by 125 feet. Butler also had a small yard and a turntable. After the smoke rise washout in 1971, this was as far west as the trains would go. The building is now a senior center. Okay, and this number 1802 is heading east with its train. Even though it's springtime, there's still plenty of snow on the ground. The Butler station was last used by passenger trains in 1966. And this is what the Butler yard looked like in 1979. The turntable site was to the left in the woods over here, thoroughly overgrown now. Susquehanna's westernmost customer was the Philadelphia Quartz Company in Butler. And so it's spotting some covered hoppers here. Yeah, after the smoke rise washout, this is the furthest west the trains would go. The locomotive would go out onto the bridge, but no further. The bridge crosses the Pequannock River into Bloomingdale. Technically, it's spring, but it sure doesn't look like it. GP 1802 is in the process of returning or running around its train. The Butler yard was protected by an upper quadrant semaphore just short of the bridge over the Pequannock River. Okay, nature had taken over the railroad west of Butler. Watch your step. This is one of the smaller ones that I've found.
What is this?
It's an eastern garter snake. Yeah, harmless. Susquehanna had two ancient truss bridges west of Butler, both spanning the Pequannock River. They were replaced with plate girder bridges from the Susquehanna's northern division, formerly Lackawanna, after Delaware Otsego decided to open up the line to Sparta Junction. This is bridge 38.75, which was a single span. In 1985, Delaware Otsego decided to rebuild the railroad west of Butler, and the work is shown underway in this photo. The line was open for traffic in November 1986. The day after I took this photo, we moved to South Jersey. So I missed all the reconstruction. The other bridge, bridge number 39.32, had two spans. Now the tubing that you see right here in the center of the bridge, that's conduit for a Western Union fiber optic cable, which used the Susquehanna's right away from Oak Ridge, at least to Pompton Lakes. Both bridges, 38.75 and 39.32, had a speed limit of 15 miles per hour, or 10 miles per hour if double-headed. They were ancient bridges. Here's the new bridge, 38.75. The line rehabilitation has about a month to go before it's open for service. And likewise, here's the new bridge 39.32. Note the new concrete abutments and pier. Because of its linear nature, a railroad is a corridor that can be used by other forms of communication. And this was especially true of the Susquehanna. In 1881, the Standard Oil Company built the first major pipeline system in the United States. This pipeline pumped oil through a single 6-inch line running between Olean, New York and Bayonne, New Jersey, a distance of 315 miles. A second 6-inch pipe was laid in 1882, a third in 1884, and a fourth in the late 1880s, which brought the total capacity of the system to over 50,000 barrels per day. There were 11 pumping stations between Olean and the Saddle River Station, which was actually in Garfield. The pumping stations were placed about 28 miles apart and were always located near a railroad to assure a supply of anthracite for the station's pump. The Unionville and Newfoundland pumping stations were served by the Susquehanna, and the pipeline paralleled the Susquehanna between Newfoundland and Midland Park. With the formation of the huge Pequannock watershed, pipeline running through the watershed area became a constant concern, as any leak would endanger the purity of water supply. Because of this, in 1916, a new pipeline was built to bypass the watershed area. On October 3rd, 1927, the last shipment of oil from Olean was made. Okay, the left picture shows the remains of two 6-inch pipelines in the Pequannock River. Okay. Across the river is the site of the Susquehanna's Butler Yard. The right picture shows a pier that the pipeline used to cross the river at Smith's Mills. The truss bridge in the background is Bridge 39.32. And some more industrial archaeology. The iron bridge at the foreground was used to carry Standard Oil's Olean Bayonne pipeline across the Saddle River between Garfield and Wallington. This view looks north. The railroad bridge immediately behind the pipeline bridge is New Jersey Transit's Bergen County line, and the concrete bridge behind it is River Drive. Less than 3,000 feet south of here, the Saddle River empties into the Passaic River. Okay, Tropical Storm Doria washed out the Susquehanna's main line at Smoke Rise on August 30th, 1971. I remember that day. We lived in a house in a floodplain and we got flooded. We're looking east. The grade crossing is Northgate Road, which connects the Smoke Rise Route 23 to the left. Northgate Road is aptly named as Smoke Rise is a gated community. The brook that took out the railroad is a tributary of the Paquonic River. The gully is quite deep and the railroad did not have the money to fix the washout. Here's another view of the washout looking north. You can see the rails dangling in the air to the right. How to fix a washout. Start with 2 tank car bodies. GATX 76111 had a loading capacity of 110,000 pounds. Note that the Susquehanna's rails on Northgate Road have been paved over. Wouldn't remain that way for much longer. A week later, the tank car bodies were in place in the gully and backfilling is underway. And most of the fill is in place. Okay, in 1957, the city of Newark decided to build a reservoir by damming the Paquonic River at Charlotteburg. This would have submerged part of the Wharton and Northern and required relocation of about 3 miles of the northern section of the railroad. Green Pond Junction, which preserved the name of the long departed Green Pond Railroad, was moved westward about 7,400 feet. A new junction was put into place in February 1959, having cost Newark approximately $590,000, more than the entire cost of building the Wharton and Northern in another age. The entire Wharton and Northern was slated for abandonment by the CNJ in 1971, but the Department of Defense raised strenuous objections. It pointed out that the Wharton and Northern shipped approximately 50 cars per month to Picatinny Arsenal, that the government had a system of approximately 40 miles of track connecting with the Wharton and Northern, and that in the year ending June 1st, 1971, Picatinny had received 498 carloads of coal alone. Okay. All right, so this shows the original Green Pond Junction, which was abandoned. That is milepost 0 of the Wharton and Northern. And Wharton and Northern mileposts were wooden posts with metal letters. And this is the dam across the Paquonic River. You don't see any water coming over the spillway because this year there was a drought. In Charlotteburg, the Operation Lifesaver is on its way back to Butler to discharge some school children, which were picked up in that borough. This is where the Macoupin Lake branch diverged from the main line. The construction of New Jersey Route 23, however, has obliterated a portion of the grade, and you can see Route 23 in the background. The Macoupin Railroad Company was 1.565 miles long and terminated at Macoupin Lake, also known as Echo Lake. At the lake, there was a dancing pavilion and a telegraph office. The branch was entirely within West Milford Township. The right-of-way is particularly evident in the wintertime. Newfoundland Station has had at least 3 paint schemes since I started photographing the railroad. The station was located off of Green Pond Road. A later photo shows the Newfoundland Station painted in the Susquehanna's post-independence paint scheme of maroon and gray. At last check, one of the Morris County Central's cabooses is still there. In 1982, Delaware Otsego acquired the assets of the Morris County Central. And you can see continuous welded rail and heavily ballasted main line. The earliest photos I have taken on the Susquehanna were in 1975. And back then I was interested in the Morris County Central Railroad, which offered steam power excursions between Newfoundland and Stockholm. Previously, the Morris County Central operated on the Morristown and Erie Railroad out of Whippany until 1973. And I remember riding an excursion there on September 19th, 1965, during the railroad's first year of operation. The fare was 75 cents for children. On the Susquehanna, there was no possibility of interfering with freight operations because of the smoke rise washout in 1971. The Morris County Central equipment was moved to the Susquehanna via the L&HR. Today, 4039 is back at the Whippany Railway Museum. Both the Oak Ridge Passenger Station and Freight House were retired in 1942 and moved off-site to Frederick's Fuel and Heating Service Yard adjacent to the railroad, where the two structures were joined together. The Freight House is to the rear of the passenger station, shown here. Oak Ridge looking east. Note the wigwag signal protecting Oak Ridge Road grid crossing. The Frederick's building on the left and its siding are now gone, but the passenger and freight station are still on Frederick's property on the right. On February 21st, 1976, the Morris County Central operated an excursion called the Snowflake Special. It was powered by ex-Southern Railway number 385, which was built by Baldwin in 1907. Number 385 is one of 2 surviving class H4 consolidations of that of the Southern. Number 385 last steamed on October 14th, 1978, and the Morris County Central went out of business at the end of 1980. In 2008, number 385 was moved to Whippany Railway Museum, where it was cosmetically restored. And a detailed history of number 385 can be found on the museum's website. Morris County Central number 25 is about to cross beneath Route 23 west of Oak Ridge. This gasoline mechanical engine, Whitco model 20 GM24 in a bicentennial paint scheme was formerly Susquehanna number 151. And this engine switched the C-train terminal in Edgewater. It was sold in 1958 along with Sister 150 after the Susquehanna purchased a new GE 45-ton switcher. Eventually, it made it back to Susquehanna rails. The engine is now back at the Whippany Railroad Museum, where it has been restored and is painted in Susquehanna livery. 5 years after the railroad was rebuilt, an office car special was seen heading east between Stockholm and Oak Ridge at milepost 48. SD 45 3630 was formerly Burlington Northern 6521, now scrapped. And again, note the welded rail and heavily ballasted track. Stockholm was the west end of the Morris County Central excursions because there was a single-ended siding there where the engine could run into and the passenger train would be pulled beyond the switch by one or both of MCC's critters. Then the engine would back out of the side onto the rear of the train for the trip back to Newfoundland. And here are the critters. Ten years later, Stockholm was the base of operations for rebuilding the line from Sparta Junction to Butler. The field office is in the background. Note the switch stand, which marks the siding that the Morris County Central used to run around their train. So you can see the switch stand on the right there. Later in 1986, the track rehabilitation was well underway, and ex-Santa Fe, CF7 was used on the work trains. This view looks east. Beaver Lake was the junction point between the main line and the Hanford branch, which descended the mountain in a steeper grade. The station was almost underneath New Jersey Route 23. We are looking west on the railroad. The station's call letters come from the station's former name, Two Bridges. And this station is now gone. You really never could get that station in Good Lake because of the highway bridge. But this is it, looking from the opposite direction. And you can see a bit to the east in the background there. That is the summit of Sparta Mountain. The only station that was still left in existence on the Hanford branch was Ogdensburg. After the O&W was abandoned in 1957, there is no reason to retain the Hanford branch west of Franklin. In 1958, 2.7 miles of the remaining portion was sold to the L&HR, and the balance of the line to Beaver Lake was abandoned. When the New Jersey Midland was building north to the state line at Hanford, they made use of a moraine left by the last glacier to cross the Wallkill River. After the remainder of this line was abandoned in 1958, the moraine and fill was mined and removed. And the Ogdensburg station is in the distance. There's a station right there. The Sterling Hill mine was still active and serviced by Conrail when this photo was taken about 1982. Today, the mine is closed and it's now a tourist attraction, but the railroad has been abandoned. So you can see some covered hoppers there on the left. The Susquehanna once marked their bridges with painted square steel plates projecting up from the abutment, denoting the bridge number. So this is bridge 57.34. There are two railroads in Sussex, the Susquehanna and the Lehigh, New England. We're looking north on the Lehigh, New England. The abutment and pier are what remain of the Susquehanna's Hanford branch. There was a connection between the two railroads here, but it was not used for interchange. The station called DC dates from when Sussex was known as Deckertown. The Susquehanna was the first to abandon, which was followed by the Lehigh, New England in 1961. This is where the Susquehanna crosses Route 517 in Sparta. The guardrail across the railroad's right of way won't be there much longer. Bridge 59.87 over Station Road and the Wallkill River, just east of Sparta Station, was considered unsafe by the Susquehanna. So in later years, the railroad did not operate Western Green Pond Junction. When Delaware Otsego took over, the bridge was demolished and a new bridge was erected. A little over 2 months later, the new bridge 59.87 has been constructed over Station Road. Didn't take them long. And just east of the station was Water Tower. Sparta Station burned in an early morning fire on September 3rd, 2012. A replica was later built to replace it. The station is at milepost 60 from Exchange Place. The following month, the Susquehanna will be open for business, and this billboard along Route 181, which is old Route 15, served as a reminder. Route 15 crosses the Susquehanna at grade north of here. The only thing left at Sparta Junction was this General American Transportation Corporation RPM reefer letter for Swift refrigerator line, SRLX 25048. It's one of 100 cars in the series, and this is the only one that was left in the official railway equipment register. So this is the lone survivor. After the line was opened, this car was rescued, and it's now at the URHS in Boonton. And oh, by the way, HO and N scale models of this very car were available. Now we're looking west on the Susquehanna at Houses Corner Road, immediately east of Sparta Junction. A new connection has been built to connect the Susquehanna with the Lehigh and Hudson River. And you can see the original Susquehanna main line heading into the distance there. Further along the new connection, we see GP 1804 with a string of Amtrak ballast hoppers standing on the former L&HR main line. And here's an Amtrak ballast regulator as well. This is at the north end of the new connection. West Mountain Road above Lake Grinnell is a good vantage point for getting photos. Here's Susquehanna E9s, 2402 and 2400 are eastbound. Susquehanna inspection train heads south through Vernon on the L&HR. The L&HR had distinctive stations, several of which still exist. Most of them had this roof style, which is called a jerkin head roof. Mikado number 142 is heading a fan trip to Warwick, New York. The trip was assisted by the Susquehanna's 2 E9s on the opposite end. And when steam is in town, even the Holsteins take notice. Sportswood Junction, Sussex County, was the eastern connection to the Lehigh in New England. We are looking east on the Susquehanna. The L&NE diverged to the left on its way to a connection with the Erie at Pine Island, New York. The L&NE was one of 6 railroads that interchanged freight at Maybrook. Haynesburg Junction in Knowlton Township, Warren County, was the western end of the L&NE trackage rights over the Susquehanna. We are looking east on the Susquehanna. The L&NE's right of way is behind and to the left of the station. see. The section house on the left there is the Lehigh New England, it's not the Susquehannas. And turning around and walking a short distance west to the bridge, the Paulins Kill. The L&NE had a small yard between the junction and this bridge for changing cars with the Susquehanna. To protect the Lehigh New England's right to build its own line across New Jersey, if it so choose, the Lackawanna built this culvert on the cutoff to protect that right. This culvert never saw a train. New Jersey Route 94 is just to the right out of the picture. Milepost 89 on the Susquehanna. In the background is the Lackawanna's Paulins Kill Viaduct. And hopefully someday we'll be able to ride a train over it to Scranton. "27 years later, the Haynesburg Junction station has fully succumbed to nature, but this sign shows its location. The Blairstown Railway was incorporated July 1st, 1876 to build a railroad between Blairstown and Delaware, where it connected with the Lackawanna's old main line. The line was opened on June 1st, 1877, 11 months later. It followed along the east bank of the Paulins Kill, almost down to the Kill's confluence with the Delaware, then turned south and paralleled the Delaware River down to Delaware. This photo looks north towards Columbia. The construction of Interstate 80 obliterated many traces of the railroad through this area. Here is the rock cut that the Blairstown Railway constructed in order to connect with the Lackawanna. Pennsylvania railroad trains had trackage rights over the Lackawanna from Monongahchunk to Gravel Place, and PRR trains stopped here for passengers bound for Belvedere, Phillipsburg, Lambertville, Trenton, and Philadelphia. The Delaware branch was abandoned in 1928. So yeah, that's the rock cut right there. And that's the Blairstown right away. Lackawanna's old main line bridge over the Delaware River at Delaware, New Jersey. The pavement in the foreground is US Route 46. I heard somewhere that Pennsylvania law requires the removal of abandoned railroad bridges. If true, it explains why the rails on the eastward track were kept in place. So it's technically not abandoned. Otherwise, the railroad would have been forced to pay for the removal of the bridge, something it could ill afford. You can no longer get this shot as the entire area surrounding the bridge has been fenced off. Columbia Lake in the foreground there was formed by damming the Paulins Kill, not far from its confluence with the Delaware River. The Susquehanna's grade is now a road behind the powerhouse. And that's the Susquehanna's grade right there, heading towards Columbia. And that's the Susquehanna's grade in Columbia. Not a whole lot left there.
That's just above the gap. Columbia.
It's below the gap,
Where?
below the Delaware Water Gap. Okay, the Lehigh New England Railroad crossed the Delaware River between Portland, Pennsylvania, and Columbia, New Jersey. The bridge was removed around 1967, but these foundations remain. This view looks east towards Interstate 80, and you can see the highway in the background there. And I'm standing approximately where it crossed over the Susquehanna. Looking in the opposite direction, these two piers of the L&NE bridge still exist. The piers in the Delaware River, though, were demolished and removed. When the Lackawanna constructed the New Jersey cutoff, it created this concrete culvert over the Susquehanna track just north of Columbia. The Susquehanna's right of way here is now occupied by Simpson Street. Although the road curves to the right past the culvert, the railroad continued straight. See Mohowski, page 34, for a photo of this culvert under construction in 1909 with an eastbound Susquehanna train passing beneath it. This is a view of the Lackawanna's Delaware River Viaduct from Mount Tammany. Simpson Street can be seen at the center left through the branches. That's Simpson Street right there. And you can see Interstate 80 right there. Hopefully this will see passenger trains again. The area on the Pennsylvania side is known as Slateford or Slateford Junction. It's where the old main line connected with the cutoff. This view from Mount Tammany looks south towards Columbia and Portland. Interstate 80 on the left occupies the grade of Susquehanna. The Lackawanna can be seen going around the point of the gap on the right. There was a permanent speed restriction of 40 miles per hour going around the point of the gap curve. The island in the Delaware River is Arrow Island, and it belongs to Pennsylvania. There was a station at Dunfield, but all traces of the railroad in this area were obliterated by the construction of Interstate 80. Dunfield was at milepost 95, but it is unlikely that this milepost survives. There is a parking area here to the left with access to the Appalachian Trail. The Susquehanna actually got the better route through the Delaware Water Gap. When the Lackawanna was building through the area, the real estate on the New Jersey side was subject to use by a party hostile to the Lackawanna. So they never got it. And yes, I was on top of that mountain. This view looks north at the Delaware Water Gap. We see Mount Mincy on the left and the borough of Delaware Water Gap, Pennsylvania, middle right. Or center right. That's Delaware Water Gap. Lackawanna served the borough directly, but the Susquehanna's Water Gap station was located inconveniently in Mini Sink Hills in Smithfield Township. In the distance, you can see the Pocono Plateau and the Music Mountains. And that's what the railroads had to cross to get to the Wyoming Valley. This view looks north at the Delaware Water Gap as well. And overlaying older aerial photos with recent topographic maps, it appears that the Susquehanna's right-of-way is now occupied by the road just to the west of Interstate 80. On the Pennsylvania side of the river, we see the Lackawanna, and the road paralleling it is Pennsylvania 611. So this road right here is probably the Susquehanna's right-of-way. The abandoned Susquehanna right-of-way appears just to the north of the Interstate 80 bridge over the Delaware River. And at this point, we are 96 miles from Exchange Place. The right-of-way is now a trail called the Caramac Trail, and it's just under a mile long. There's a small parking area adjacent. So you get off at the last exit before the bridge, go down to the bottom, and there's a parking area there. The road on the right is the Old Mine Road, said to be the oldest public road in the United States, stretching from Columbia to Kingston, New York. It is at least 250 years old, but the Dutch were in the area since 1626, prospecting for copper ore. The Old Mine Road probably had its origin as a Paleo-Indian trail some 12,000 years ago. The highway bridge over the Delaware River was built by the Delaware River Joint Toll Bridge Commission and was opened on December 16th, 1953, and is 2,465 feet in length. And apparently scrappers didn't get everything. The Delaware Water Gap was a prime tourist destination, but as Lackawanna built through the area first, most of the hotels are on the Pennsylvania side of the river. However, there were a few hotels on the New Jersey side, and the Merrimack Hotel overlooked the Delaware just north of where the Susquehanna crossed the river. And the hotel had its own flag stop. Just ahead is Bridge 96.88. And that's the New Jersey abutment of Bridge 96.8. And it was pretty solid being built on rock. This photo was taken one day shy of the winter solstice in 1981. The Susquehanna crossed the Delaware on a bridge with 4 trusses. In 1955, Hurricane Diane took out the pier closest to the Pennsylvania side and undermined the Pennsylvania abutment. One curiosity was that milepost 97 was on the bridge, about 634 feet from the eastern abutment. Okay, and this is a map of the Water Gap area. You can see the Susquehanna crossing right here. This is Merrimack right here. This is Smithfield Township in here. And here's the borough of Delaware Water Gap, PA. Yeah, the Susquehanna's Water Gap Station was well north of the Delaware Water Gap. So if you wanted to visit the area, the Lackawanna was the better choice. The Susquehanna's right of way in Mini Sink Hills, Smithfield Township, is now occupied by Price's Landing Road. Bailey Road has been renamed River Road, Route 2028. And the road crossing of Broadhead Creek, shown on the map, has been moved about 2,400 feet downstream. And it's also called River Road. Note where the Susquehanna crossed over the Lackawanna along Broadhead Creek. And this is the crossing here. I'll go through this fairly quickly. Plenty of bridges and abutments were there in 1982, which you could photograph. Some over streams, some over highways. And here's milepost 98. And it's going through a rock cut. Another bridge over a road. And here's where the Susquehanna crossed the Lackawanna tracks and then Broadhead Creek. This view looks west towards East Stroudsburg on the Lackawanna. The location of the Lackawanna is called Slide Curve. It is west of where the Lackawanna crossed Broadhead Creek at Bill's Bridge. And if you travel on Interstate 80, you look over when you're crossing Broadhead Creek, you will see the Lackawanna Bridge there. That's called Bill's Bridge. And that's looking across Broadhead Creek. And milepost 99, we're getting close to Stroudsburg. This view looks east. This is the highest numbered Susquehanna milepost I have found so far. Number 99. Okay, the Susquehanna originally built through Stroudsburg onto Gravel Place where it connected with the Lackawanna. After the Wilkes-Barre and Eastern was completed, and you can see the junction point just south of McMichael Creek, the connection at Gravel Place was severed and the line cut back to Stroudsburg. Unfortunately, railroads, abandoned or not, make wonderful routes for highways, and as such, the WB&E right-of-way in Stroudsburg is now occupied by Interstate 80. The Stroudsburgs actually had 5 railroads, aside from the Lackawanna, Susquehanna, and Wilkes-Barre and Eastern. there was the Delaware Valley Railroad, which ran from East Stroudsburg to Bushkill. Its station in Marshall's Creek still exists. Also, the Pennsylvania had trackage rights of the Lackawanna from Minooka-Chunk to Gravel Place. And again, one could catch a PRR train in East Stroudsburg for Trenton. And where these other lines were, here's the Lackawanna main line right here. This is the Delaware Valley Railroad right here. Here's the Susquehanna. And here's the Wilkes-Barre and Eastern. In this topographic map, Lackawanna's Morrison Essex division ended at East Stroudsburg, and that's where the Scranton division began. However, in timetables, the station was usually referred to as Stroudsburg, sometimes Stroudsburg and East Stroudsburg. But over here, that's the junction point between the Susquehanna and the Wilkes-Barre and Eastern. And if you go over here, you'll see some trackage in here. That was called shops. This is what Wilkes-Barre and Eastern Junction looks like. The WB&E went pretty much through the center, the Susquehanna to the right. Because of flood control projects, a lot has changed there. However, the Stroudsburg's station of the Susquehanna still exists. It has been relocated to 537 Ann Street and is now a thrift shop. After the WB&E was completed, a new passenger station was constructed for Stroudsburg on the WB&E, a half a mile west of the junction. So this is still there. Okay, the Susquehanna's right of way is now Kane Street in Stroudsburg. Main Street is in the foreground. Compare this photo to the one in Krause and Christ, page 97. Particularly pay attention to this building on the left. This is Main Street right here, and this is Kane Street. This is the Susquehanna's right of way, and Susquehanna Station was originally right over here. There are a few relics left in 1982, such as this coal trestle, which was served by the Susquehanna. It is gone now. But it sold famous Reading anthracite. And this concrete bridge crossed over McConnell Street to reach the coal trestle. The structure is still there, but the coal trestle is gone. Shops was the major locomotive shop for the Susquehanna, the Wilkes-Barre and Eastern, and also the Susquehanna Connecting Railroad. Shops was 0.8 of a mile west of the Stroudsburg passenger station. All Susquehanna trains to and from Stroudsburg from points east terminated here. Now, as I was driving along Interstate 80 one day, which is built on the WB&E, at least in this area, I spotted the buildings and I knew instantly what they were. So I had my camera with me, so I took the photos. This site is now occupied by a recycling company. To get to this site, take Dreyer Avenue west from Main Street, pass beneath I-80, and make a left onto Cotts Road. Now, I'm not sure if these buildings are still there today.
That's like a tractor.
I don't know. Could be a shadow. And that's it.